So today we will discuss about interdependence and dependency model. And from here you can say that alternative paradigm starts. We discussed about dominant paradigm, and we discussed that there were certain limitations and how it failed to deliver the desired result in many developing nations. And after that, many other theories came in, and all those theories can be considered as alternative paradigms. So in alternative paradigms, first two model, one is interdependence model and second is dependency model. After the failure of dominant paradigm, communication scholars and development scientists presented a number of other paradigms. Of these paradigms, an important one is interdependent paradigm, interdependent model, and which was proposed by Nordenstrong and Schiller in 1979. So you have to remember this name, that Nordenstrong and Schiller were the person who gave this model, interdependent model. In this model, both these scholars stressed the need for global structure in the perspective of communication and development. These scholars found that if you want to become developed and if you want to have a robust communication structure, you need to change the global structure, because in current global structure it is very difficult to become developed, because there are countries who have greater control over this global structure, and those countries are Western countries, America, and all those developed countries. They have full control over this whole system, economic system, and due to this, it is very difficult for developing nations to become developed, because they have to first come out from the clutches of these developed countries. These scholars said that we have to develop a kind of interdependence between developed countries and developing countries, right? We will come to that. You have to first understand that yes, there is some problem in global structure, and we have to change that if you want to become developed, and if you want to have a good communication structure. The theory mainly emphasizes on economic growth. Hence, in this regard, it is same as dominant paradigm. Some people say that this theory also very much focused on economic growth only. So that's why it is not different from dominant paradigm. But economic growth is a key for development. So in development communication model, economic growth will be an important element. So anyway, people criticize this model, but because this model also focusing on the economic growth only. Theory assumes development and underdevelopment as two facets of the same process. Further, when he talks about global structure, that there is a dominant group in world who has greater control over the whole system, he says that development and underdevelopment are a outcome of same process, two facets of the same process. You can say two sides of the same coin. If urban center has to become developed, then rural sites has to be underdeveloped. If rich people have to become more richer, then poor people will have to become more poorer. This is how, because resources are limited, And if some countries have control over those resources, then certainly those countries will be more benefiting from the available resources than those countries who have less control over those resources. And you can understand by various international affairs related issues, in which you will find that how America and Western countries always try to have greater control over world resources. Take the case of oil, petroleum, and just to have control over this energy, petroleum, they have fought many wars. Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, all these countries are rich in oil-based industry, and that's why this country want to have greater control over these countries. And this is the fact. Right now, you will find that all the Western countries and American companies have their hold on these oil fields. So this is how this whole structure works. So that's why these two scholars say that how can you assume that you will become developed when you don't have control over the existing global structure. So he says the theory argued that modern world comprised a single capitalist world economy, which we have discussed earlier and many times, that how there is only one system, a capitalist world economy, and in this capitalist world economy, you will find that there is a unipolar world also, where America has greater importance and American-led countries have greater control over all the system. So that's why he suggests that you have to change this. So development is one aspect of a larger change in the society and economy as a whole. And it is useless to think communication and development in a national setting without considering world economic system and conditions, right? So development is possible only when you will start thinking above the national setting. You cannot think that nationally you will make certain changes and you will become developed, because I mean overall international system is biased. Overall international system is pro Western countries, and you have to deal with this also. The theory observes that interdependence means not only interdependence of the countries, but of the process of the source. He says that under this global structure, you have to find out a new kind of structure, where there will be interdependence between developed countries and developing nations. And interdependence means that on some issues, developed countries will also be dependent on us, developing countries, and developing countries will also be dependent on developed countries. This kind of a structure is needed to bring development in the society. You can understand it with some example, that when WTO came into being, then all the developing nations were given some extra benefits, and they have been permitted, all the governments of the developing nations were permitted to give subsidies to their farmers, because it was considered that in these countries, developing nations, farming or agriculture sustainable kind of thing. If government will not support farmers, then obviously farmers will die. So they said that in developing nations, government can support farmers, they can give subsidies to farmers. But you will see under the WTO regime, WTO asked all the countries to remove subsidies, and then only it will be a fair market. Before WTO, it was found that American government used to give huge subsidies to farmers, and due to this, farmers used to sell their product in international market with very less price. And this was the reason that many developing nations' product could not compete with American products. So when WTO came, WTO asked these countries, developed nations, to stop subsidies, and they permitted developing nations to keep giving subsidies to farmers, and then they started So it is kind of interdependence that you are already developed, so you need not to give subsidy. Your farmers are well-to-do, so you need not to give subsidies to your farmer. Let developing nations emerge, and let developing nations have their share in the world market. So this is how things work. Raw material, I mean, interdependence model. Some things should come in our country also. Some production centers, some companies should come to our country also. And developed nations should be dependent on raw material, on the developing nations for raw material, and the developing nations should be dependent on technological input and some capital intensive economic system for establishing this kind of system. So I mean, both parties should be interdependent, then only this will work. So now you must be getting that what kind of economic structure, what kind of world structure is needed for bringing development in the developing nations. So this was the idea of Norröstring and Schiller. Again, and it is not only that interdependence only on the economic affairs. It also says that interdependence should be on various processes and issues also. For example, that if some scientific innovations is taking place, if suppose NASA is planning to go to Mars, then some developing countries should also be part of that process, right? If developed nations are dealing with certain issues, that how to deal with removing poverty or for climate change, all these kind of issues, or some other issues, any issues, then developing nations should also be part of a whole process. So this is what he suggested, that developing nations and developed countries both should be interdependent to each other, and both should be taking part in each processes and issues together. Then only this kind of interdependence will bring development to both the parties. So this is what is suggested. So it was generally found that the interdependent model of communication mainly emphasizes the international relationship between developing and developed countries, right? The theory also considers that communication is important in their struggle to achieve meaningful national economy. So communication is also a very important part because developing and developed, international relationship between developing and developed countries, this should be dealt by communication infrastructure. Whole communication should also deal with international relationship between developing and developed countries. And even you will find that there is a paper for journalism students, not in our university, in other universities I have found, even in Delhi I found, in IMC, this was the paper, International Communication. And this is very important paper in which you will find that how whole communication is being controlled by the Western world. If you will find the various agencies, AP, AFP, Reuters, you will find that 60 to 70% news we get from abroad are not from our agency, but we are dependent on foreign agencies for getting news. So you will find that in this field, international relationship related news, we are very much dependent on foreign agencies. So this theory says that our communication should also focus on these things, international relationship between developing and developed countries. And so then our communication system will also start talking about that what kind of relationship is needed for development. So this is what this theory suggests. The theory also considers that communication is important in the struggle to achieve meaningful national economy, right? This approach is also criticized mainly for its supportive nature of Western capitalist development model. So we will find that it is supported. Ultimately, it is also supporting Western capitalist development model. It is not talking about some other kind of development model, but yes, it has certain it has given certain other ideas about bringing development, but basically the whole development idea is based on capitalist model. This is why it is criticized also. This is the first theory under alternative paradigm. Second is dependency model. Dependency model came in the early 1970s. Both the theories came during in 1970s, and it came after failure of dominant and interdependent model. Obviously, interdependent model also failed because the kind of thing this model was suggesting that might be very good in theoretical perspective, but if you want to implement those ideas practically, it could not happen. So this was the problem, and that's why both, I mean, this interdependent model also failed. And one of the founding father of this dependency model was A.G. Frank. In 1969, he gave his idea about dependency model, and he argued that foreign technology and information have created underdevelopment rather than bringing development. Again, you will find that, I mean, both interdependent model and dependency model, these two models are basically criticism of dominant paradigm. It is not, and that's why this is the main reason why these two models were never adopted. Even now, you will find that whatever we do and whatever steps we take for development, all are related to dominant paradigm only. The reason is that alternative paradigm did not give very, some practical oriented ideas, and that's why it could not be possible to adopt it. And you will find that it says that foreign technology and information have created an underdevelopment, right, rather than being development. And the idea is basically that developing nations are labor-intensive economy. There is a huge population, and the Western model talks about technological development. And this is the reason why it brought underdevelopment rather than bringing development. Dependency model talks about this. So this model tried to find out the cause of failure of development programs, right? So, and development and underdevelopment as two faces of the same coin, shaped by specific historical, economic, and political factors. Again, you will find that it is an extension of interdependent model. It talks about that development and underdevelopment are two faces of the same coin, and why it happened? Because there are certain specific historical, economic, and political factors. For example, take the case of India. Why India became underdeveloped? When Britishers came here, Britishers control our whole economy. They control our governments, and they exploited our raw material. They used our raw material for their own benefit, for their development, not for our development. They brought railway, all the new facilities you found in our country. Those facilities were only to exploit our economy, not to benefit our economy. So these historical or economic factors or political factors, all these factors come together. All these factors are reason for underdevelopment. You cannot say that we are underdevelopment just because we lack idea. You can't say that we are underdeveloped because we don't have new technology, right? We became underdeveloped because due to some historical, economic, and political factors, and that's why these things. And so he says that neither the causes nor the solutions of underdevelopment should be sought exclusively within the poorest countries. So you cannot find what was the reason, what dominant paradigm and other paradigm try to find out that if we are underdeveloped, then certainly there is some problem in our society or our economic structure. But main reason, and what will be the solution? We have to change, and then we will become developed. So, but this theory says that no, you cannot find the causes of underdevelopment in within the poorest countries, because cause of underdevelopment is some historical, economic, and political factors, and that might be Western countries are. They are responsible for underdevelopment of these countries. So he tried to suggest that, and that's why solutions will also come from outside. You will not. You have to remove. You have to first understand the causes of underdevelopment, and you will have to remove those causes then only it will become development. The imbalances in the world state of affairs is reason for the continuation of past pattern of domination. So the domination which has started during industrial revolution, that domination continues till now. And as we discussed earlier also, that after Second World War, Western countries established certain institutions, IMF, World Bank, UN, all these institutions were made just to keep their domination over newly independent countries. And they started putting their monies through these channels to our countries, right? So you have to, remove these imbalances, then only development will come. The world was separated. He talks about two kind of, he divides world into two blocks. One is core, composed of few rich countries, and another is many poor countries. And in these poor countries, he says peripheral countries. So he divides world into two groups. One is core countries, and second is peripheral countries. Core countries are some richer countries, and peripheral countries are all other poor countries. So he says that the main role of the peripheral countries was restricted to that of supplying raw materials and cheap labor to the richer ones, making it impossible for them to ever catch up. So even now you will find that even in our country, we produce so many things, but we export raw material to Japan and some other Western countries. Iron ore, even iron ore, we are one of the largest producer of iron ore. But what we do, we provide our iron ore to Japan. We export that way. So this is the reason we are still, now you will find that many developing countries are just supplier of raw materials and cheap labor, and you have to remove this kind of setup. So cultural and economic dependency on developed countries saves the social and economic structure of many developing countries. So we are dependent basically. So we have to break this dependency. This theory suggests. So what will have to do? Nationally, you have to developing countries on the periphery, but to become economically self-reliant and less dependent on foreign imports. Right? Solution is that you have to be self-reliant. Right? Whatever machinery you need, whatever production you need, you try to produce it in your own country. So you will become self-reliant, and you will have to be less dependent on foreign imports. And then only you will break that dependency on Western countries. And internationally, you have to form alliances among themselves to create a stronger political presence. So all the developing countries should create their own alliance. For example, you will find that so many new alliances have been made. For example, ASEAN is a, alliance of all the developing nations only. Then IBSA, in which you will find that India, Brazil, South Africa, these three countries are part of this alliance. Then again, you will find in which China is also a member. China, South Africa, Brazil, India. There are certain alliances. You will go, you will see about all the development. You just search about alliances, Indian alliances, alliances of India. You will find so many new alliances where we tried internationally to become self-reliant. So nationally, you have to be economically self-reliant, and internationally, you have to form alliances, right? So that you can have greater presence, political presence. Politically, you will have to be little more visible. You will have to be strong enough that Western countries should not, deny your presence, right? So these kind of things is needed for these are suggested solutions by the dependency model, and overall change the overall international set of relationships by forming a block of many countries with similar aspirants, right? So you have to form alliances, and greater role is that overall international setup of relationship have to be changed. So developing countries will become more prominent in international affairs. This is the solution for bringing development in the developing nations. So uh, as far as media is concerned, the dependency model criticizes the mass media. He says that mass media is a tool for ideological aggression. And it is completely different from dominant paradigm. In dominant paradigm, what it suggests that mass media is magic multiplier. You put idea, you put information through mass media, and it will reach to the millions. But here, this theory suggests that media is a tool for ideological aggression. It means that mass media is not helping to bring development in society, but basically it is filling the masses, filling the mind of masses through different ideologies, and those aggressions are not bringing good for the community, for the society, right? So, and which kind of ideological aggression? The ideological aggression which would be helpful in for translational interests. This kind of idea they promote, where we become more, over consumption. They promote over consumption. They promote Western lifestyle. They promote Western products, right? So these kind of ideologies they promote, and it is not for the benefit of the society, but basically it is the benefits of, it is for the benefits of transnational companies, right? That's why this theory suggests classical media-centric conception of communication, in which the state is expected to represent the wider public interest. It means state control media. It talks about little bit state control media, that whether a state should understand, first state should be self-reliant, and then a state will realize that no, you have to use mass media according to the national interest. So somehow it talks about state control media, where state will understand the wider public interest. What is good for the public, what is bad for the public, what kind of information should be distributed among people, right? So this kind of thing, and again, and this is the classical media which China has adopted. China has a state control media. They decide that what should be communicated to the masses. So this is what dependency theory suggested. The dependency theories emphasize the use of interpersonal communication channels, and it says that no, mass media, our dependency should not be on mass media, but basically our emphasis should be on interpersonal communication channels, right? And this channel will be more beneficial for the society. The theory argued that mass media system in third world countries is caught in dependency relationship. The theory has stressed the need for such a strategy which would serve both the educational and mobilizing function. So he says that we are in dependency, we are dependent on Western ideas, Western knowledge. So we have to break this dependency, and we have to use mass media for educational mobilizing function. We have to mobilize people through mass media, we have to educate people through mass media, but obviously under state control. So this is what, and if you will see China, you will find that China is somehow did the same thing. China became self-reliant economically. China has a greater political presence all over the world. You cannot deny China, right? Now it is becoming an economic power. Also, you will find that the kind of media they have a state control media. They don't have open media, right? So this is what China did, and China is an example. It's okay that our relationship is not good with China, and this is a problem. But if you will see the rise of developing nations, China is number one. China became developed, and they were same at the time of independence. China was not a very developed country. We started at the same level, and China goes very far up from us, right? So this is what this theory says. Criticism, it is oversimplified division of the world into core and periphery. It you will find that it is a oversimplification basically. You cannot divide a whole world into these two, only two groups. You will find that in peripheral countries also there are some countries who are rich, who are good. Take the example of developing nations. In developing nations, Africa, Brazil, India, China, these countries are considered good in peripheral countries. So you cannot put these countries into peripheral countries. We'll have to create another group which should be in middle between core and peripheral countries, and these middle countries takes more benefits than those countries who are very much down, right? So this oversimplified division is a point of criticism. So second is dependency theories fail to consider relevant internal causes contributing to the problem, such as the role played by national elites. Again, you will find that dependency theories talks about that yes, there is a dependency over developed countries, but it does not talk about that what is being done by our own elite. Our own elite means that our own companies, Tata, Ambani, Birla, all these people have created a new kind of economic system, and they control whole economies. So the role of these elites have not been discussed in dependency theory. This is second point of criticism. Even you will find that all these Reliance and all these big transnational companies, all these big companies of our countries, they have their own interest, and sometimes you will find that they become part of those transnational interests. They become party of those transnational interests because it is for their benefit. So you will have to discuss about the role of these elites also, right? So dependency theory failed to do so. Dependency theories are also criticized for how little attention they pay to the differences in political economic status among developing countries, which I talked about right now, that there is difference among developing nations also. Dependency theories did not consider and support the wider role that freer communication system, despite significant differences between modernization and dependency theories, their communication model was basically the same, a one-way communication flow. So you will find that dependency theory did not consider freer communication system. It talks about a state control system. So anyway, a state control or a Western countries control, both the theory somehow talks about one-way communication flow only. It is not taking masses. It is not taking common people into consideration. So these are certain point of criticism of dependency theory. So thank you. Now, if you have any question, you can answer.